guys, it's Trina and this is my January reading wrap up. I read 10 books this month. You saw what they were in that introduction there, so if there's one specifically that you need to know my review on and don't care about the rest, you can use the timestamps that are in the description. There's also links in the description to all the books that I'm going to talk about today so that you can easily find them. Starting out like always with my TBR check-in, there were 5 books that I wanted to read this month and I did read 4 of those 5, and the last one, Wayfarer, I am currently reading, so I just didn't finish it by the end of the month. As for the 10 books that I read, I'm going to start like always at the bottom of my ratings and move my way up to my more favorite reads of the month. The first book I finished in January was Life and Death by Stephanie Meyer, which is the Twilight version where Edward is a girl and Bella is a boy, so in this version it's Edith and Beau instead of Edward and Bella. I've been reading this book for like over a year. I mean, I put it down for several months in the middle there, but I finally picked it up just because I wanted to be done with it and kind of get it off of my to be read shelf. And my thoughts on this are, it was difficult to get into for the reason of Edward and Bella are like so ingrained in my head because of the movies. Like, I'm picturing Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, and it was very, very difficult to shake that mental image. And so many times while reading this version, I had to stop and remind myself that I was picturing them wrong. I will say that I enjoyed the ending a lot. I gave it 3 stars. It's Twilight. However you felt about Twilight is going to be the same way that you felt about this one. I read this one out of sheer curiosity. Am I glad that I read it? I don't know, but I did enjoy the ending, and I would only recommend this to people who are just like completely die-hard fans of Twilight or are morbidly curious about this reimagining of it. Next, I read The Rose and the Dagger by Renee, which is the second book in the Wrath and the Dawn duology, so this is the finale. The first book was a retelling of 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights, and it was a story of this young king who every day would marry a new bride and then he would kill her the next morning. His last bride was the best friend of our main character, Shazi, so Shazi then goes to the palace and offers herself up as his next bride with the intention of killing him. But of course, there's a whole long book here, so you know more happens than just her simply killing him or him simply killing her. There's more to it than that. I read The Wrath and the Dawn whenever it came out and I didn't enjoy it. So I was not planning on picking this one up, but the YA BookTube Awards happened this month and I was a judge for the retellings category, and this is one of the books that was nominated, so that is the reason why I did continue this series. And by the way, that live show has already happened, so if you want to know which book won the retellings category, then don't forget to check that out on Elizabeth's channel, The Owlery. I'll put a link to that down below too. And my opinions on this book is that I did think that this one was much better than book 1. It had gotten away from some of the tropes that I was annoyed with, but in the end, there were some plot choices made that made no sense or were very rushed, and I didn't feel like the characters or the magic system or the world building, I didn't feel like any of those were well developed because I didn't understand like why this magic existed in this world or how. None of the characters seemed to have their own personalities. They were just there to do whatever Shahrazad needed them to do at the moment. So, you know, this book is fine, it's fine, but I didn't have any attachment to it, probably because I just didn't like the first book. If you really loved the first book, I could definitely see you having much more attachment to it and probably enjoying this one a lot more than I did. Next, also at 3 stars, I read Monstress Volume 1 by Marjorie and Sana Takeda, and this is a comic series that is a fantasy series. It is set in like an alternate version of Asia. It's about a girl and there's a monster living inside of her, and in this world there's a ton of different groups of people that all are like at war with each other. I don't know what was going on in this, and I think that's just because this is a huge world and there are a lot of characters in it, and there's a very limited page space to introduce all of this stuff in a comic series. So I was very confused by it. I didn't understand why anything was really happening. I wasn't really invested in it. I did enjoy that this one had a lot of women in it. Like, almost all of the characters are female. There's a lot of women that are in power in this world and in this story. I did like the main character. I did want to know more about her, but at this point, I'm not sure that I want to continue the story because I'm just left thinking, what was that? Maybe that's just me, maybe I'm just dumb, it was just over my head or whatever, but I find that that typically happens with me in fantasy comic series. I just think that the format is too small for such a big concept. For the concept, I would rate this one 4 stars. For my enjoyment, I rate it 2 stars. So I just kind of evened those out and settled on a 3-star rating. I would still recommend this one to you guys because I think it was just me. Next, I read The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is an adult thriller novel about a journalist who goes on this boat, this cruise boat. When she gets there, she realizes that one of the cabins is empty, except she saw a woman in that cabin, but no one else on the ship ever has seen this woman. There's no one that's supposed to be in that cabin, so what is the mystery behind The Woman in Cabin 10? If you guys follow me on Twitter or on Goodreads, you will know that I pointed out some problems that I had with kind of ableist language of this book. It talks about weight, both fat people and thin people. It talks about their weights in this really weird way. It's not exactly shaming, but there's a lot of emphasis put on people being other because they're too thin or they're too heavy. There's also a lot of emphasis on the appearance of one of the sick characters. It just didn't set well with me. Despite this, I did still really end up enjoying this mystery. I was on the edge of my seat. I needed to know what happened. It's weird, but I enjoyed the ride. The main character does have anxiety, and she does have PTSD from like the first chapter, you know that. And so the book does kind of explore the stigma around mental health. Although I can't speak for everybody's experiences, I enjoyed that part of it. So I would recommend this one if you like mysteries, but I recommend it with the caveat that I didn't like the way that some of the characters were described. Next, I read Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which is an Alice in Wonderland kind of retelling. It gives you the backstory of the Queen of Hearts. So it's set in the same world. You see some of the same characters from Alice in Wonderland, but this is a brand new story that is just expanding on the Queen of Hearts and where she came from and who she was. I didn't think that I wanted this story. I don't care that much about Alice in Wonderland. I certainly don't care about the Queen of Hearts. Again, this is a book that I read for the YA BookTube Awards in the retellings category, and I ended up actually really enjoying this one. This one does have some fat shaming in it for sure, but I did feel like in the end the character kind of like put her foot down about it and was like, that's not okay. I really loved the character Kath, who is the Queen of Hearts. I loved getting her backstory. I don't think that this redeemed her, but it makes you understand her, and it makes you understand how an ordinary average person with hopes and dreams and motivations of their own can be pushed to becoming a villain. Marissa Meyer wrote this in a way that felt true to that original world, but fun for me. Like, it made me enjoy something that I didn't enjoy that much before. So I really had a fun time with it. That's really basically how I can describe it. Fun. I liked it. Next, I read The Rebel of the Sands by Alwyn Hamilton. This is a debut novel of 2016, and this one is the first in a new series. It's usually described as a mashup between 1001 Nights and the Wild West. It's definitely not a retelling of 1001 Nights, but it does have that Middle Eastern setting, but then the culture of some of the cities does have a Wild West feeling. Our main character is a sharpshooter, and all she wants is to pay her way out of her small town, and she basically finds herself caught up in a rebellion. I do want to point out that a lot of reviewers have said that this does contain negative stereotypes about Middle Eastern people, and I do think it is important to point out that that is true and that this is not an Own Voices account. So I mean, that might be something that you take into consideration if you're thinking about if you want to read or buy this one. This is a book that I read for the debut category of the Young Adult BookTube Awards, and there's also been that live show too. And so my thoughts on this one are, I did really enjoy the story, and part of the reason is because this one felt like it had full-fleshed world building. For a debut, I was very impressed. There was a creation story here, there was a unique magic system, and I understood the magic system, and I really loved the main character's role in the story because she's not like the chosen one, but she is still a part of this rebellion. I really enjoyed the slight survival aspects. I loved the tension between the two main characters, so I thought it was very, very well crafted. But again, with the caveat, there is some negative stereotypes of Middle Eastern cultures. Next, I read The Midnight Star by Marie Lu, which is the third and final book in the Young Elites trilogy. This copy of the book was sent to me by Penguin Teen for review consideration, but I was already reading it from my library, so this was always a book that I was planning to read, and these thoughts and opinions on it are my own. This is a YA fantasy series about our main character Adelina, who is kind of a villain. Like, a lot of people call this a villain origin story. In this land, an illness swept through, and the people that survived that illness, some of them were given these supernatural abilities, and we're following our main character that does have an ability. She meets up with a group of characters that have abilities. It is by a diverse author, and you do have characters who are diverse in race and sexuality. I really enjoyed this story from start to finish, and it took me a long time to get to book 2 and then to finish the series, but I'm really glad that I did, because this was such a fulfilling series finale for me. Like, I've really been struggling when it comes to YA fantasy series finales. There were a couple of parts that I felt started to slow down the pace, they started to kind of drag, but things wrapped up in just such a fulfilling way to me. I really enjoyed this one, and I enjoyed the series overall, and I do have a full series non-spoiler review up if you want to hear more about it. Now we are on to the 3 books that I rated 5 stars this month. So I've got 3 favorites. The first of those is March Book 1 by John Lewis, Andrew Aydin, and Nate Powell. John Lewis is a US congressman, and he was very active in the American Civil Rights Movement, and this is a trilogy of graphic novels that illustrates his involvement with that. Part 1 takes place mostly in Nashville, Tennessee, where he is a student and he starts becoming involved in sit-ins with some of the Nashville businesses in order to end segregation. I'm from Nashville, that's where I live, that's where I'm from, and seeing this part of our history, which we learn about in school, having this story told from John Lewis himself was just, it's priceless, and I highly recommend this. Very important story. I will definitely be continuing this trilogy. I also read Deafo by Cece Bell this month, and this is another illustrated memoir. So Cece Bell is a woman that has a hearing impairment, and this is her own story of growing up with a hearing aid and all of her feelings around it. Like, she was very self-conscious about wearing this and would people notice it, and she also talks a lot about how her peers interacted with her. Like, some people would shout at her because they thought that would help her hear better. Although this is just one person's experience, I definitely think that it was very informative, and it's also very relatable in terms of like the childhood friendships for me. I was like, yep, I know how that feels. So I really enjoyed this one. I would highly recommend it. And the last book that I read in January was 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. This is a book about a girl who has taken her own life, and she sent out these cassette tapes to 13 different people in her school. And these tapes are basically her suicide letter, and we are reading from the point of view of one of those 13 people that's received the tapes. On the tapes, Hannah tells basically her life story and why these 13 different people have affected her life, some in good ways, some in bad ways. I really enjoyed this one, and I listened to this one on audiobook. That was highly recommended to me because when you listen to the audiobook, you're actually listening to Hannah's tapes. I think that format worked beautifully for this one. Now, I have tried to look into if this is good representation of people that have been affected by suicide or suicidal ideation or depression, and every once in a while I see somebody say this was not reflective of what I have experienced. And I can totally respect that. I don't think any one story is going to perfectly represent everybody else. But from what I could tell, this is definitely written for an outside perspective. Jay Asher's intention in writing this was to show like teenagers in high school how your actions and your words can affect and harm other people. He does definitely explore Hannah's desire to blame others, but Hannah also fully takes responsibility for her own actions, so I thought those things were balanced very well. If you're an adult, if you're older, you probably already know, I think, the messages that Jay Asher was trying to send with this one, but I think this is a great starting place. But I probably would not recommend this to someone that is currently having ideas and thoughts of suicide, because I think that getting into Hannah's head could probably be very triggering. The other complaint that I hear about this one is just that it lacks plot. I personally don't think that this one really needed a plot, because that's not the intention of this story. I thought it was great, like important, great. So I gave it 5 stars. So that is everything that I read in January. If you guys have read any of these books mentioned, please let me know. We can talk about them more. Or if you have any other questions about any of these books that I did not cover in this video, you can ask me those down below, or be sure to check out my Goodreads account too, because I have reviews written on all of these books. Let me know what your favorite read of January was. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the comments. Bye!